Well, so I'd like to welcome Alessandro Fedele, Global Head of the Private Sector Unit of IFRC, Thomas Aliyev of Operations Coordinator for Turkey from ICRC, and one of our key speakers here, Dr. Abbas Gulay, Secretary General to the Kenya Red Cross Society. Thank you very much. Yes, so in this session, Sustainable Humanitarian Financing, we will talk about how to better finance humanitarian operations in a sustainable way. And as I said, we have our key speakers here. So I believe in all topics, there's an issue facing many obstacles. So let's start with why funding is it predictable or unpredictable, Dr. Abbas?
I think I would say, first and foremost, I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate the Turkish Red Crescent for these talks here today, but also for 150th anniversary of continuous humanitarian services to this nation, but also global. Going back to the issue of whether it's predictable or not predictable, I think one could say probably both. It's predictable because last year, 2017, globally what was given about 21.7 billion US dollars into the humanitarian business. What we know is that 1.3 was unearmarked. The rest was earmarked, and we normally know who is earmarked to. It's given to, basically multilateral. It would be to UN, it would be to international NGOs, could be ICRC, could be partly IFRC, but INGOs by and large. Of that, only 0.04% was given to what you would call local actors. On the other hand, it's also predictable because there were three large major donors globally out of this whole amount, which is the US and European Union and maybe UK. The rest, you wonder where the rest of the world is. Is it not captured, their data or the information, or is it simply they're not there? On the other hand, it's predictable because it goes to certain organization. It doesn't go where it should be. On the other hand, it's all earmarked, and majority of it is earmarked. So then you can only do there. But we need to go beyond that to be able to be more predictable or unpredictable as it may be seen.
Okay, well, taking that from the figures, actually, moving on to Alessandro there, to have a better understanding. So the figure shows in 2017, international humanitarian response was at $27.3 billion. Only 9% came from private donors. So where is the private donors and private sector?
It's interesting because the figures sometimes don't say the entire story. And there are two ways to answer to this question, actually. One, in principle, can be very personal because when I enjoy IFRC, I was told, you are useless, you are private sector, bring the money. Private sector doesn't bring a lot of money. But interesting enough, the pure financial added value of the private sector doesn't give the big picture. And one of the things I did when I arrived, in fact, is to measure the larger perspective of the added value that private sector can bring. Just to give you an example, there is a very important high-tech company, just to not mention to make the names, but they give us a lot of licensing for free, they give us a lot of funds, they give us a lot of training, and at a certain point I was able to identify my global focal point that was missing. We did a sort of assessment of the value of this partnership in the last 5 years, assuming the retail value of the things that we were giving for free. It was more than 50 million. So we have to understand that many of the things that we do with the private sector do not transit through the pure financial incomes, but represent an incredible added value. What is the value, for instance, to having the opportunity to have a privileged access to transport in case of emergencies? What is the value to have access to the satellite to have an immediate image situation, map situation to assess the situation after a disaster. What is the value of a senior digital expert that comes to our office for 1 year and help us to design an entire architecture for a platform that will be used for better monitoring and evaluating our work in disaster? So I don't think we will always find a solution in the entire measurement, but my personal effort and the effort of many people together with me is to measure the added value of the private sector beyond pure financial. But I also wanted to give you another perspective of the history, which is the potential of private sector. Now, you can make your own mathematics just Googling, but if we consider the entire value of the stock exchange capitalization today, we take 0.5%, we multiply by 10, which is almost the horizon of the Agenda 2030, we will discover that is about 3.5 trillion. So I'm also here to say, dear private sector, I don't know many people are here from the private sector, dear potential partner, if you want to play, you can play much harder than how you are playing now, helping us to support the people in need.
And how do you get them to help, though? Who would like to answer that? Dr. Abbas?
How they like to help in the private sector?
Yes.
Well, I think the private sector is willing to engage, is how we as humanitarian actors are willing to also go out and engage with them. I mean, I work in Kenya with a lot of private sector. They are quite a partner to me. As long as you are accountable, transparent, you know what you're doing, they would be willing to engage. What Fidele just talked about, and I don't even mind to hide, is about Airbus, what he was talking about. Airbus, they have technology that many of us need as part of our innovation on a daily basis, to have drones, to have satellite imagery, that you can get assessment correctly on the spot within minutes of a disaster occurring, which will have taken us 5-10 days to assess physically. You can get information on your fingertip, just sitting in your office, because the information is there and you're able to download and work on it. So I don't think the issue is the private sector. Private sector would be willing to. Yes, they have interest to do business. They have to also fly their flags. But they have resources and knowledge and know-how that if we really utilize, then it can increase efficiency, cost effectiveness, timeliness of our responses to disasters and emergencies.
So, Thomas, we're talking, about financing and humanitarian aid. So does it become a business when it comes to aid, but it's still money involved?
Yeah, thank you, Aisha. Before answering the question, I'd like maybe to make two comments. The first one is to join Dr. Goulet in thanking Kızılay for organizing this event that is indeed important, and to thank all those who have joined us today to participate to this conversation. And the second one, very quickly, was because the previous conversation struck quite a chord with me. And as an organization that has lost more than 7 of its people in the field just in the last year, knowing the tremendous amount of risk that Kızılay volunteers and staff are taking nowadays in Yemen, in Gaza, and anything, I don't think calling humanitarians to be more courageous and to go on suicide mission is the answer. The answer is about having conflicts and parties to conflict to respect the rules and protect humanitarians. That sounded like a very important point to make. Now, does humanitarian run the risk of becoming a business when it starts interacting with business? Not at all. If you remember the founder of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, Henri Dunant, was himself a businessman. We have always needed business to learn from the fact that it's in the business that efficiency is, and innovative solutions for efficiency as usually best researched. We need to learn from the business. But what is important for us to learn as well is that a business goes nowhere if it doesn't have the trust from its shareholders and the trust from its clients. We will never have clients. We will serve people, and we will never be there to make profit. But if we don't have the trust of the people who give us money, either simple citizens, as probably some of you are in this room, and if we don't have the trust of those we serve, then we cannot operate, and we cannot operate safely. So it's all about striving to create, cultivate, maintain that trust by being transparent, by being also efficient, knowing that the means you give us to operate will go to the people they are intended for, and will have an impact there.
Okay, well, I don't want to talk too much about figures and numbers here, but when we look at them, it shows that only 0.4% of all international humanitarian assistance went to local and national NGOs. That's very poor numbers. Why is that?
Why? Because simply the status quo remains, is what Mukesh earlier said in the previous talk, where primarily those with the resources will give to their own, will not want to promote the national and local institution to take over. 2 years ago, you had the World Humanitarian Summit here. We talked about localization of aid. What is the result today? The result is as poor as it was then. Not to say nothing is being done, but I'm a local. I come from a national society, just like here in Turkey. And who is willing to put resources directly? It has to go through an international NGO. It has to go through ICRC, IFRC, it has to go donor national, what we call donor national society, it has to go through UN, it has to go through multilateral. It doesn't go direct to the national institution, even if they have a capacity, because what is being said, they can't be trusted, they have no capacity, they must provide oversight, and on and on and on. The world, if it is serious, it wants to change, it must change and change now. The issue of cash transfer, I mean, we congratulate, it was said in the opening remarks, Turkish Red Crescent, for having moved that agenda. I think globally, Kenya Red Cross is the second society in the world on that in terms of doing cash transfer using mobile money. You are giving back people their dignity. You are allowing them to buy what they need to buy, as opposed to prescribing or as opposed to sending things to them they have no use for in the first place. And I think this is the way the challenge comes in. And this is where the reform and transformation must take place. And Turkish Red Crescent, Turkish government, and many of the countries of the South must take more responsibility than before in order to change this paradigm shift that needs to be done today, not tomorrow.
So I think from there, how can it be reformed? What are the solutions there or models, Thomas?
Reforms. I very largely concur with what Dr. Goulet said. Empowerment of local actors is key. Empowerment of local humanitarian actors, empowerment of also local private sector actors, because at the end of the day, should all the essential services and goods that are necessary for anyone to live a dignified life be brought by the humanitarian sector? Also, probably not. It's very important to give people the dignified means to also choose where they will be receiving the services and goods they need. And so that calls for actors, especially that are in the hardest places to reach. The Kenyan Red Cross is a great example of that. In the ICRC, we also try to be really a frontline operator. It calls for teaching other actors, helping them, more than teaching, actually helping them to bring their services, to arrive in environments that maybe until now they have considered as too volatile, too unstable. For the private sector, is the likelihood of making a profit really there or not? But they have to reinvent themselves in order to bring their services to people who need them. I'll give you a very concrete example. If someone is diabetic, should insulin be brought only by humanitarian actors? Or should the business model of the health sector and should the Ministry of Health of the given country be able to provide this access to insulin to those who need it where they need it? These are the questions. Empowering all local actors and including whenever there are rifts, divides in society that can make it difficult.
So, Alessandra, how would you describe an ideal partner?
I will contradict myself now, because the ideal partner is someone that brings the money, doesn't ask anything in return. So, of course, this is the ideal. Well, this is not possible, I understand. So, probably the ideal partner is someone that is ready to engage with us on the long term, rather than on one-off intervention, is someone that is ready to really have a sincere, joint approach to the resolution of problems, where we combine together complementary resources, and also is a partner that is also, let's say, in few words, ready also to give regular resources, earmark resources, which is a fundamental consequence of a profound trust that we have. Just to give you an example, I have a foundation. I will not quote the foundation because they want to remain as usual anonymous, but I have a foundation that gave me substantial money for a study that we are doing in search optimization. And this is money really just for headcount, for people that think. So this is how I see the ideal partner, a partner that I understand that beyond and behind the delivery of specific services to people in need, there are also people that need to think and need to project and need to develop architecture and need funds to be funded. And on this space, I'd like also, because sometimes we understand things by comparison. So the problem of the ideal partner is what I call the marketing paradox. So let's think, for instance, the private sector. In the corporation world, you need to sell product to your clients. And your clients have the power, by the choice they do when they're purchasing product, to make your changes. So if I buy, I will follow a certain strategy. If I'm not able to sell my product, I need to review the strategy. But I need to understand which are my consumer needs. And they have the power to influence my strategies. If you think the public sector, the citizens have the power of the vote. So the politicians, the government receive feedback by the amount of votes they get in return. In our sector, our peculiarity is that our client, our customers are in reality the beneficiary, the people in need. Actually, they don't have any power to feedback to us because in reality, they don't have this mechanism of return. So the marketing paradox is when we, as humanitarian, we confuse our client, our customer, who are the beneficiary, with the donors. And then it happens sometimes that the donor comes with a very predefined solution or predefined project or predefined product, and they wanted to sell it even without before understanding what are the needs and how we can work together for the solution. So ultimately, in order to fix this marketing paradox, I would say that the best partner in reality is someone that comes to me and asks me how we can help, and we work together.
Well, when we look at the numbers again, the most funding comes from EU and North America. So where are the other countries? Thomas?
What other countries? Well, there are over 180 or 90 other countries. No, but the numbers that are recorded, fair enough, but who records the generosity, the amount of donation that Turkish society, just by hosting millions of Syrian refugees, has been giving? This does not show up, this is not assessed. Okay, the European Commission has been helping, but not entirely. The cost for hosting refugees that is incurred in Lebanon, that is incurred by local communities and by the government in Jordan, does not appear in these figures, and that I find it very unfair. The amount of remittances, the amount of people who have chosen to take a very dangerous, strenuous journey to go to a place where they would be earning just a bit more money to be able to send back to their families, this should count as well, and this should, I think, rebalance the whole generosity picture. But I see where your question is going. At least in the ICRC, I can't talk on behalf of the whole ecosystem. We are seeing progressively Gulf states taking an interest in what we are able to achieve. Beyond, it's interesting to see that nowadays China is setting up its own humanitarian agency. But this system of state donation towards humanitarian actors, intergovernmental institutions or non-governmental institutions can also has many different other modalities that I'm thinking as well about this beautiful pillar of Islam. If I understand well, that charity should be one of your 5 obligations. Is this counted in the measurement of worldwide generosity? I don't think it is, and that should be part of the picture, and it would radically change how we see who is doing what, who is giving what. And just my last point will be that because of a certain history, it's true that some economies nowadays are a bit richer than others, and maybe the future will see a different picture. And when you are richer, I think it's normal that you should be giving a bit more.
So there's actually more hope than what the figures show, I take from that. So, Dr. Gullet, how do you ensure a strong and sustainable system in humanitarian financing? What needs to be done?
So I guess what needs to be done is, like I earlier said, there has to be a paradigm shift, a shift in the sense that, look, first of all, what was said is correct, that there are a lot of data and information that is not captured. Like he asked, where is Turkey's indication? Where is what has been given by Turkish, what has been given by the Islamic world, what has been given by even other countries? I come from Kenya, and in Kenya, for example, we hosted refugees and still continue to host them 30 years later. We were the largest refugee hosting country before Turkey became the #1. What the host community give in terms of land, in terms of water, in terms of resources, in terms of environment, in terms of trees, is just mind-boggling. That is not captured, not written, not quantified, and not then shared. In fact, host countries by far give much more than what the international aid gives, if we were to put money on the table. So that's #1. But #2, what needs to be changed is first of all, this needs to be changed. This needs to be captured. And I think for the Islamic world, for example, Turkey and the rest of the Islamic world, every Muslim gives 2.5% zakah as a taxation. Where is this money? Why are we not accessing this money? Even after accessing this money, how this money is used, even the multilateral one, how it is used is the question. Because today, it is earmarked, it is relief, it's not long time, it's not sustainable. How do we make it more sustainable, more open, so that it's just not emergency, but more resilient, more long term is what we require? How did you have refugees in Kenya for 30 years on food handouts? Who is benefiting from this? Why did you not teach them to, like President Koenig said this morning, about whether we teach you to catch fish or do we just prescribe what type of fish you should be eating every day? These are the issues that need to drastically change. But the Islamic world also must change in the way we do zakah, sukuk, and the way we do business. I can give a small example. Last year, we were given through IFRC $1 million Zakah Foundation, Zakah Fund from Malaysia. We used that money because of the drought in Kenya. $500,000 in water, $500,000 in giving seeds. And we timed it with the rainy season. When you gave seeds to farmers, 2 kilograms of seeds, someone is able to plant, and someone in 3 months is able to harvest enough food to last him or her another whole season. So this idea of food handouts and aid, we are only supporting farmers, whether they're American farmers or Chinese or French farmers, is what are basically subsidized that is being given through WFP is what then we as relief agents are giving out. Should we do that? Should we give them seeds so that they can plant, they can grow, they can depend on themselves? If it's an animal person with a lot of pastoralist community, look after the animals, give pasture, they'll produce more. They will give charity themselves as opposed to waiting for handouts.
So, Alessandro, are there alternative ways to generating financing resources?
A colleague of mine told me the problem is not the money. The money are there outside. The problem is that we are not able to capture them. And maybe this is too much as an exaggeration, but it's an interesting metaphor to understand that the example that the Secretary General of Kenya made is just a small case of something that is much bigger. So there are alternative financing models. More than alternatives, I'd like to say there are complementary financial models that cannot replace the incredible, substantial role that still government and traditional usual suspect institution must play also in the future. Now, the work we did is basically to map this universe in 4 main blocks. The first block is about sustainable investments. So basically today and the next future, there are companies that we will measure their success, not just from the pure profit and money that will generate, but also from the positive impact that they will generate in the society. And this new approach, because they understand they have a social role in the world, will release a lot of money in the future. We might know what Unilever is doing, what IKEA is doing, but in the future, this will become more common practice. Now, this bubble is estimated to be above 8 trillion. Then there is a second dimension. A second dimension is about impact investing. We have a very good, successful example from ICRC, for instance, that launched the impact bond. It was just 25 million, I guess, out of an organization that his revenue is 2 billion. So the opportunity can be much bigger, but they are at the front to develop this kind of alternative model. We recently launched the idea of a cat bond for prevention of catastrophes. So there are new models because there is a lot of private capital looking for alternative remuneration of that capital. Now, this third dimension is estimated to be around 1 trillion, but today the total social impact, humanitarian impact bond counts less than 300 million. So the opportunity versus the reality is still, the gap ahead of us is big. And then we have a fourth dimension whose Secretary General of Kenya did the example, which is the Islamic social financing. The Islamic social financing, so the entire amount of donation at the different, let's say, title for different reasons, are estimated to be 3.5 trillion. Of course, this is a potential volume that needs to be captured by connecting with the local community. It's not a centralized volume of money. But this is a fourth dimension opportunity of financial model where we are trying to understand. And this is where also alternative and new partners are needed, because we are partner, for instance, with the fintech expert to let us understand how we can develop the digital, we can leverage the digital revolution to capture this money. We are leading with experts also in the academic world of Islamic social financing to understand which are the rules of the game to connect in a constructive way with these communities.
Well, we don't have much time left, so our speakers were keen to take some questions. We don't have much time, but is there anybody wanting to ask a question? This panel, we wanted to do something different, be more interactive, to find more solutions while we're here. So we have 2 minutes, I'd say 2 questions, if anybody would like to ask. Is there someone there? Yes. Well, I believe, do we have a microphone? Yes, please.
Merhabalar, ben Şırnak'tan katılıyorum. Finansman konusunda şimdi hep arayışlar içinde oluyorsunuz da, peki niye çözüm yok? Bakıyorum
well,
herkes...
basically, just a second, I would have to translate that. So, would you repeat your question again, very shortly?
Finansmanı niye üretici olarak kendiniz yapamıyorsunuz?
Why can't you finance?
Bunun çeşitli kalemleri var, üretici, tüketici anlamında. Bunlar niye yapılmıyor? Ki az önce arkadaşın ismini biliyorum da. Airbus'tan...
Muhatabı ben olmadığım için soruları speakerlarımıza soracağız. O yüzden İngilizce olsa daha kolay olurdu bizim
İngilizce
için.
bilmiyorum.
Benim alanım değil çünkü onların alanı. Yani why can you find more partners, more solutions to finance directly rather than searching out there? How would it be easier for them to come to you, basically? Dr. Abbas, I think. Dr. Gled.
Well, I think for me, what we are learning, and I'm very happy that I'm in Turkey today and with the Turkish Red Crescent, if we are to be sustainable as national societies in our own respective countries, we must find other ways of doing business. Doing real business, tangible business, legal business that will give us resources so that we can address humanitarian issues, we can be more sustainable. And we are copying what, in a way, Turkey is doing, what Iran, Red Crescent is doing, what some of these developing countries are doing. Because if we're just going to wait for aid, it is shrinking, it's not increasing, it's more competitive, it's more selective, and we can go on that. So we have, for example, invested in hotel business, in hotel school business, in an ambulance business. We just started a commercial TV business, which people think we are crazy, but the fact of the matter is the resource we're going to raise, the profits will go back into humanitarian work. If Turkey has done water bottling for 100 years, I want to learn from Dr. Koenig and his team and his company how they do this. If it is making tents for your emergency, whatever the issue is, we must learn to do business differently, fend for ourselves, and stop this donor dependency syndrome that we've had for 50 to 60 to 100 years, which is just unsustainable anymore.
Thank you very much. One more question? Yes? Microphone, please.
Should we use this one?
Just very briefly. I don't know. We'll see whether it's Turkish or English.
It'll be English.
Okay.
Dear panel, thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. And reflecting on the conversation about the alternative ways of humanitarian financing, over the past years there's been growing theme of applying blockchain technologies as well as their offspring in terms of cryptocurrencies to how we do business in humanitarian world. Would you be able to reflect on that a little bit? It'll be very useful. Thank you very much.
Just very briefly, we're running over time, so who would you like to take that?
So, we know about this technology, and in the logic of alternative and new partner, we in fact are partnering with an expert of blockchain that is teaching us how to use this new technology. The implication and the application are infinite. It's not just cryptocurrencies, but also to use this new, let's say, technology also to make a much more transparent and efficient way to move goods, to give transparency to contract, etc. The point is that we are a big organization with a lot of responsibility. So we are in a phase of experimentation, as well as other big organizations. UNICEF also is experimenting. We are having a dialogue. I don't think today, if you also consider how, let's say, variable is even the value of the Bitcoin, for instance, I don't think we are ready to use cryptocurrencies as alternative form of donation. But for sure, blockchain is something that will have implication in the humanitarian sector, as well as in all many other private sector dimensions. Yeah.
So, Thomas, on your note, we'll finish.
Just very quickly, the interest of blockchain is that it creates accountability. You register each and every transaction, and that's, of course, when we were talking about trust, creating trust, being able to be sure that the money goes to the intended beneficiary, to the intended end user somehow. This is very strong. Now, how really to use it also, for instance, in the logistic chain, more and more of bigger companies are moving towards blockchain. How do you improve the reliability of your logistic chain? This is something valuable. Cryptocurrencies are, for the time being, too volatile not to be going against what this panel is about, sustainable humanitarian financing. For the time being, there's still some learning and maturity to be gained there. And to just come back on the question that was asked by the gentleman over there, I think, well, from the perspective of the ICRC, where our mandate is really about armed conflict, this can be a turf very difficult to invest in for a lot of companies, but I would argue that your natural entry point in the movement is the national society that you have in your country, and you have a very strong and powerful one in the Turkish Red Crescent Society in Kızılay. So go and multiply the partnerships with Kızılay. It needs it, and the entire movement will welcome it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, all our speakers here, Dr. Abbas Gulay, Thomas Salih, and Alessandro Fedele. Thank you very much.
Ciao, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thomas.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Aisha. Teşekkürler.